Okay, we're live. Welcome back to Book from Scratch. Sorry it's been so long since my last one. Trying to think this next book through was actually quite difficult, and I'm still not all the way there. But I think that's a good thing for if you're an author. You've obviously come to this series of videos to see an author write their next book live, like all the steps, the comprehensive planning and the actual typing, and maybe at the end trying to like find a publisher for it. And one of the things that I think is good to see is like how difficult that can be to get you to understand, like to that the process can be quite difficult, and there's nothing wrong with that, and it's fairly common for an author to struggle, writer's block wise, to take all of this is like the this is, I think, the key sort of notes for the whole book, because you can see it's going to be like an anthology, to take these notes and expand them into a proper book that we're going to do. And that's what Book from Scratch is about. You're watching me live write everything, plan everything, maybe get everything published, who knows. I'm certainly going to try, if it's good, of course. So go and watch all the other videos for all the extra details. I just want to get straight into this. But what we're doing today, we're doing, let's get a nice bright colour so you can see. We're going to be doing the murder mystery one right here. So this is an anthology of different books, because I want to cover as much different styles and like different genres of writing as possible. It's an overall fantasy story, and we've done the sort of intro fantasy story, we've done the horror story, we've done the western story, we've done the sci-fi story. Now we're going to look at a murder mystery story. So I need a fresh page, if the computer will let me, which it will. Here we go, but a different colour. What colour was I using for murder mystery? Ooh, I just like that colour, so we're going to use that one. So, what's crucial about a murder mystery, first and foremost? A good murder mystery should be solvable. That is, I think, the key thing of what makes murder mystery. Well, I say murder mysteries, but let's just say crime novels as well. So, but like a mystery is the catch-all term. So there's something for the reader to figure out, and the author is revealing piecemeal the information. So I think the most important thing is, and go check out other instructional videos, how-to videos on how to write. They'll give you a bit more information. They might approach it slightly differently. This is just me. This is my opinion as a writer. Doesn't mean it's the right one. I think it's right, but I think to be a good writer, you need to take all these different perspectives in and think what works for you. Like, there's books out there which have sold millions and people love them, but there's also the same book is hated by a load of other million people. So the truth is, a book is like any other form of entertainment. It entertains for the people who pick it up, read it, and get hooked and keep going. Yeah, I like that overall. It's the same with every kind of art. From pictures to films to theatre to books and so on and so to music, so on and so forth. This is just how I think a mystery story should be written, but I'm obviously going to take into account lots of other advice from other people. So again, first, the most important, it must be solvable. It must be solvable as a story. The reader must be able to solve it. Now, that's actually kind of a lie. I think what I mean is that the things that get you to the end, the things that discover who the murderer was, come to bring all the clues together and realize how the crime was done, or who the person was really, who's their real identity, stuff like that. It should all the clues should be in there, so that when the detective at the end of the story, the amateur detective, the consultant, whatever, when they get to explaining how it was done, it all makes sense and all the clues were there, even if the reader didn't spot them. One of the what was it? It's I love Sherlock Holmes. I think Sherlock Holmes is a good overall detective, and the cases and mysteries around that IP are incredible. And I feel I just like watching them. However, a very recent version called Sherlock, with Benedict Cumberbatch, Martin Freeman, and a bunch of others, and I never liked this version of Sherlock, and that's because it was unsolvable. Every so often, Sherlock was just pulling information out of nowhere that we did not have any access to solve the mysteries, and I like gave up on it. Like I can't solve this. I can't even like get even part of the way there. So that's dull. I think a good murder mystery should be able to. You should be able to solve the crimes. Maybe you can't solve it 100% of the way that the detective can, because sometimes there are clues that are hidden from you, but it should still make sense, and you should be able to see the detective's through line. There's a very recent excellent series starring David Mitchell. Why do I? It's gone. I had it right there in my brain. I'm going to look this up while I'm talking to you. The series was called David Mitchell series. Ludwig. That was it. Now Ludwig has if you don't know, maybe some spoiler alerts here. He's like a normal guy. He's got a twin brother who's a cop. His cop brother disappears. He decides to sort of take his place, like pretend to be a cop in order to get some information on what happened to him. And he ends up solving crimes by using the fact that he does like crosswords and he does games and he does all the sort of clues and things for these like, magazine games and things like that. But when he approaches crime, he just realizes, it's like this puzzle. So he lays out the puzzle, fills in all the details, and it spits out the answer. And that's an interesting way. Now, when I think we watched Ludwig, we can't solve it unless we pause and try and take in all the information. But the TV series doesn't give all the information that you could plug into a sort of puzzle solver and that would spit out the answer. But it still feels satisfying to watch it because you understand how it was done and you actually think, oh, I just have to do the steps he does, and I could be a detective like him, or amateur detective, consultant, whatever. Either way, Ludwig, very good series that does that correctly. Does the murder mystery correctly, even though you probably couldn't solve it because you don't have the details, but the details haven't just been plucked from the ether like they are in Sherlock. Another one might be Death in Paradise, excellent BBC TV show set on Semmery Island I don't know if that's a made-up island, I never checked, in the Caribbean. But there are some details that get left out, but you can solve it because how the crime was done kind of requires a bit almost like Jonathan Creek kind of thinking. You have to think, how could this possibly have been done? And you could figure out multiple different ideas of how it could be done and apply them here. You wouldn't get all the way, you wouldn't get all the motives, you wouldn't get all the details, but you could figure out how it was done because there are enough clues. So always make your murder mystery solvable. You're also going to need red herrings. Red herrings, if you don't know, are all the sort of diversions to get the readership to go, oh, I kind of think it must be this person, and off you go, and they try and follow the clues, and then it's a dead end. And the detective also follows those red herrings. It's like the distractions. And I'm pretty sure you've watched a TV show before, sat down and sort of gone, well, they're arresting this person right now, but we're only halfway through the episode, so he probably definitely didn't do it. It's probably her, and whatever. It's there's obviously in a story you're going to be leading people towards the correct answer and then completely divert them away to another one. And it follows what I've talked about frequently on this live stream of when you've got a beginning, a middle and end of the stories, your beginning bit is sort of rising towards a solution to the central problem the book gives you, and then it all collapses or everything changes around the middle, and then they have to rise again towards another solution or correcting an issue, defeating a bad guy, whatever. Murder mysteries are like full of going up, down, almost finding the murderer, but not actually, going down, trying again until finally it's solved. But also, you could also write a murder mystery where you're rising, you solve it, but the solution causes you to discover another crime, and then you have to rise and solve that crime. So there's two crimes within the whole thing. There's also the murder mysteries that do the whole let's say, I think I was watching one called Monk recently, and it basically tells you how it was done. It shows you who it is. So it actually shows you the end, and then you watch the beginning and the middle as the detective starts figuring it out. There is a little collapse sometimes, but then he's back at the end, and it fills in some other additional details. And actually, the joy of that kind of murder mystery is not solving it. So that's a exception to a rule there for the first one. But those murder mysteries are still entertaining because you want to see how a person becomes, how they solve it. I also think that my third rule, these aren't comprehensive, of a good murder mystery is, it's like, it's not tactics, is it not strategy? It's not strategy. It's what I'm trying to think of is how they solve it. That a good murder mystery, like you could have your classic police procedural. So like the police solve crimes all the time. Of course they do. They solve crimes that can be quite difficult to figure out all the time. Like the murder mysteries you see are taken from sometimes real life events. Sometimes you have your police officer who's the bumbling police officer who needs the consulting detective, but in truth, you've got your police. The police are a professional organisation. They know how to solve crimes. They know what to follow. And in a murder mystery, you could follow. There are plenty of murder mysteries out there that just follow how the police do it normally. And essentially the policeman is not really this massive genius. They're just a cop with the right training, the right experience, and that leads them to the correct solution. And Death in Paradise, one of my favourite sort of murder mystery shows, is exactly that. Each detective, inspector, whatever, who takes over in each season, or when they change them up, because like the detective in Death in Paradise is like Doctor Who in many respects, and constantly changing, but that's what keeps the series fresh and interesting. All of those detectives, they're not portrayed as being exceptional I mean they are, but they don't have like the Sherlock Holmes like way of solving crimes. They're not like the Miss Marple way of solving crimes or the Columbo way of solving crimes. They're policemen who really just go through the motions and the police procedures in order to figure it all out. That's good. That's fine for a book. But I think that your detective, if you really want to make a big splash in writing a mystery novel, is give your detective, again, it's not strategy, it's not tactics. What's the word I'm looking for method. So the method of the detective. Police procedural ones are fine. They're entertaining. You can solve them. The police officer is, while they're not doing anything different from perhaps a normal cop, they still have those flash moments of inspiration that you go, oh, they're geniuses, and they kind of are, and they're definitely portrayed as such. But it's usually just their little quirks of personality that help them to do it. But the method of the detective, I think, because in a way, Death in Paradise, the method of detecting is the quirks of each detective. Their behaviour is always a little bit different to the previous one, and that helps them to solve it, I think. But either way, I think you should think carefully about how your detective, whoever that is, goes about solving the crime. And I feel that's more entertaining and also informative. Sherlock Holmes figures out how mysteries are done by looking at all the details of a crime scene and all the details of their suspects and weaves them together into a narrative that makes sense. And the one that makes the most sense is the one that gets followed. If it's a dead end, it's fine for Sherlock Holmes. He just seeks out the next one. And he sees what other people don't see and uses that to find who the criminal is. He's also prepared to do work that perhaps a cop would never have time for, but Sherlock Holmes is the consultant. He has the time. Miss Marple is like her method of figuring out how the crime was done was just to present herself as a sort of, not a detective, as a sort of, she's just an old lady going around, just curious, just asking questions, being compassionate, being interested, and just getting people to talk and get the information she needs, and then it's all put together. And then going back to say Ludwig, for example, the method there is, I'll just look at all these crime details, feed them, it's this kind of puzzle, feed it into the puzzle, and out spits the answer. So we need to, or I need to do really, I need to come up with a way for my characters to get all of these things into this murder mystery story. So solvable is going to be somewhat different because we're in a fantasy universe. But I just realised where I can take inspiration from. I'm going to write this down here. Men at Arms. Men at Arms is a Discworld book which is set in a fantasy universe, yet the sort of mystery of who's doing it is revealed piecemeal. And the reason why doing a murder mystery in a magical world is difficult is because, well, magic did it and it solves everything, and the reader could be a bit frustrated with that. Red herrings, I can only do those as I go, as I form the story, and the method of the detective. Now, I'm not. So Fortis and Huxton are my primary characters. I'm not going to let them be the main. They're going to be, they're going to be the John Watsons of this, and the admin. I still haven't thought of a name for it yet. I haven't gone back and done that, and that's fine. You don't have to have everything in place beforehand. But the admin character, she's going to be the solver of the crime. She's going to essentially be the main detective. So I need to give her a strategy for doing that. So let's move on. Get a new page. Okay, so a murder mystery. Now, themes. When you're writing a book, you're probably going to have a theme in mind. You can write just an entertaining book. You don't need a theme. That's fine. But sometimes you're going to. It appears. I think lots of books have themes in them, so we need to cover it in our book, in my book too. I say ours because some of you have already actually contributed to it. So the main theme of this, in case you haven't watched any other episodes, is that defeating the Sauron character in a fantasy story, or any sort of story where there's a big bad guy that needs to be defeated, I realised that in our world, that doesn't really work, right? Like Hitler, one of the biggest bads in all of history, of course, and that's saying that lightly, wasn't really defeated in the big sort of set piece battle, was he? It actually took millions of people working lots of different roles, soldiers, tacticians, civilians, resistance members, all whittling away the army until they could get to him, but then he shot himself, whatever. But there's no big battle in our real history. There's no big battle against the big bad. You could say, well, the Nazis are the big bad, and yeah, that's true. But again, it's a lot of little things that work towards victory. We always put the onus on maybe Churchill. Some people might say Stalin. Some people would say de Gaulle, and they would go with generals like Patton and Montgomery. However, while they're the big names, Churchill just is in an office going, okay, get these people to do that, please. Get these people. He's making big decisions. It's important. But those decisions lead to people who have to do real life things like put their life on the line. They have to take risks. They have to put themselves in danger. And it's actually their little things that are defeating the bad guy. So the main theme here in this story is how, rather than Fortis and Huxton are our main characters, they're going to rise and rise, leveling up, getting stronger and stronger and stronger. But then they're going to decide to stop going for the big bad guys, and they're going to start dealing with lots of little bad guys that are actually in their way, and are actually in the way to progress within this fantasy universe. So they're part of a team, they plateau and they only deal with these bad guys. The rest of the team continues on to fight the big bad guy called Bob. At the moment, we'll change his name. And so they're going that way because they think they just have to defeat this big bad guy. But meanwhile, Fortis and Huxton will spend a significant part of the entire book, which is like an anthology of short books, defeating more mid-range, but that has a bigger effect. And it's got the whole theme is like trying to teach the reader, to show the reader that today we have a lot of problems with presidents of the United States, with terrible prime ministers in Great Britain, terrible presidents in Russia, and and so on and so forth, and all like the billionaire class, the ruling class of all of the whole world, that we're trying to defeat them, and that's good. But really, if we want to defeat them and make some actual progress, we need a lot of change, a lot lower down. I'm not saying that you are the bad guy. What I'm saying is that so many little changes beneath these guys need to change, and it actually takes away their power. Like if people can just become more compassionate, then you're less likely to get these dictators, because people won't vote for them, they won't back them, and they lose that entire foundation of their support. Donald Trump, fascist attempting dictator of America, is only there because over a third of those who can vote in American elections voted for him, and their support is based on taking his lies and believing them, and wanting what he wants. And there's lots of different reasons why. Some are tricked, some don't really do the research, some think he's the good guy when he's not. But trying to defeat him isn't really working. Instead, we should be working to change that over a third of the voting electorate of America to see him as, well, the truth of what he is. And if you change them, that's progress, because then they won't vote for those people again, and the system changes and progress is actually made, and America can become a better country because of it. And America can start thinking differently, should be thinking differently about Democrats, who are clearly not doing a great job at defeating this wannabe fascist dictator. And I think that rather than a book, this is not criticizing the Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings is about defeating Sauron, the big bad guy. Okay, that's fine. It's a great story. I love it. And I also think we should have stories that teach, yeah, he needs to be defeated, but there's all these problems down here. He's up here. There's all these problems down here. That if we just get rid of solve these problems, all that power is gone. And this comes out in the series as a whole. So through these ones here, what you see is that as each victory against a specific bad person is revealed in each book, it's cutting away power that Bob will try to have in the future. So in the fantasy adventure at the beginning, it's about taking, well, that's just set up. In the horror one, it's about preventing people from being manipulated by fear. In the Western one, it's about taking away a resource and giving it back to people who will properly manage it and taking it out of rich people's hands. In the sci-fi one, it's about denying a weapon that Bob could use in the future. And in the murder mystery one, which is actually being paired with the thriller one as well, this is all about how the system of government needs to be changed. And by changing the system of government, you deny Bob the opportunity to degrade this, say, a force of power that could resist him. It's like how in Lord of the Rings, Gondor, which could actually resist the giant army Sauron has made. However, Sauron has manipulated the government through Denethor to be worse at doing its job and resisting, and thus there's less of a chance. And he also cripples, tries to cripple Rohan, preventing another huge batch of power from being on their side. If you watch the film, it's different in the book, of course, but if you watch the film, there's all those. Theoden says less than half of what I wanted from my army, which means there was actually thousands more Rohan people who could have helped at the Battle of Minas Tirith, perhaps making the whole battle so much easier, preventing the loss of life of the people of Minas Tirith, stuff like that. So the murder mystery book is going to set up the thriller book, and this one is about how we solve government problems so that Bob, when he comes to this big kingdom to defeat it, because it's the main power in land, he actually gets so much more resistance than he was expecting, because Fortis and Huxton have resolved the problems of this government, which we should be doing. Like, one day, like, President Trump will be taken out of power. You'll probably have some Democrats in mind. The sad truth is that the Democrats are probably not going to make any significant changes to American politics, because they're brought on. Well, not all of them, of course. The Democrats have better people than definitely the Republicans do, but there's still a leadership that problem at the heart of the Democratic Party that will probably just take a load of campaign contributions from the richest people in America and keep things. They'll make things slightly better, but they won't change them, and the Republicans will just be back with someone who's worse than Donald Trump. Like that's some thinking within the entire sort of political sphere at the moment, and that's what this. That's how I'm going to put that theme into this murder mystery book. At the end, solving the crime will lead into the sort of political shenanigans where we put a better person in charge of the nation instead of letting this terrible politician take their place, who's more in line, who ruins the country, making it an easier target for Bob. Like, remember Harry Potter, for example. In Harry Potter, throughout all the books until you get to the last one, the spoiler alert, Voldemort finds it very easy to take over because the Ministry of Magic is corrupted. And it's sort of shown that the weak political forces of the Ministry of Magic just keep putting terrible people in line, making it easy. So if you imagine what we're doing, Fortis and Huxton are jumping in at the right moment to take away that corrupted government. So instead we keep a good government in line, which builds greater and greater strength, so that when essentially the Voldemort character comes in, he can't defeat this group because they're so much more powerful. They're not weakened, and more importantly, they're not weakened because of the choices that Fortis and Huxton make and what they show the people of this kingdom, the nation, should be. So that will come in the next book, but I do have to keep this theme in mind so that I can play it into here. So the mystery one. I don't like this colour. I'm going to find a different one. Oh, I like that one. Maybe multiple colours. I'll have to do it that way. Right. So, I'm going to do the standard beginning, middle, and end. I'm not going to flip around. I'm not going to show people the crime, show you who did it. I want people to be able to work it out. For it to be a murder mystery, for it to feed into the next book, like the criminal. Okay, so little arrow going off. Zoom in. Oops. The murderer, because I'm going to do a murder mystery. The murderer must be part of the cabal to take over. So whoever the murderer is, I know at the very end they must be someone who's part of this group who wants to take over from, in this instance, a king, like a king who's in charge. They want to do progressive things, and essentially the murder is part of a way to force them out, put in this other person who's more corrupt and who's going to make things worse for the kingdom, and thus Bob can take over easily. And that won't happen in the next book, but that's who the murderer is. So I already know who the murderer is, which means actually at the middle the king will be implicated. The king will be implicated, so that it seems like the king's going to fall from grace. Fortis, Huxton and the admin solve the crime, and the king goes back into his place. I'm going to have a nice little battle there, like in the king's palace, where Fortis and Huxton reveal the truth of the crime, and rather than just being arrested, there's a battle, and that battle leads into the political thriller of the next one. And then the political thriller is also where the band of adventurers that Fortis and Huxton are a part of is going to split apart. Not completely with hatred and anger, but amicably, but with an agree to disagree kind of situation. So the king will be implicated in that murder, which means someone needs to be murdered, obviously. So who is going to be murdered? Let's think about this. The king is doing. He's progressing the nation forward. He's getting stronger and stronger, so he'll be able to resist Bob, who's the main Sauron, Voldemort, White Witch kind of character. So who it's obviously got to be someone close to the king. It's got to, the population of the kingdom would demand justice regardless if it's the king or not. So it has to be someone popular. The victim. Someone popular. But on the king's side. Let's think about this. It's hard to think of good rulers in history, of course, but what does a good ruler need by their side? They need someone who brings the people in. Ooh. Well, I was going to say like priest of Snakar, who's the deity, so to speak, of this place. If you haven't looked at any episodes, this entire fantasy world is on the back of a snail that just slimes its way through space, and the snail itself is like the deity, since its two eye stalks provide the light. They're like the sun of this kingdom. So I was going to say maybe a priest of Snakar, and then they're killed. But the thing is, finding like the idea that in his, I mean, I'm going to write that down for the time being. Someone on the king's side, so like a priest of. I'm not going to call them a priest. I'm going to call them something else. Snakar. I think that's how I spelled it. The Snakar who pushes for reform. So he's pushing for reform. The king agrees, pushes for reform to the nation. To the nation. And so the king is agreeing. The king wants the same thing as the priest, so the priest is the one getting the people on board, the king is the one enacting the law. So they're working together, and he's the victim, okay? Or she's the victim, or they're the victim. Either way, that's the victim. The victim is someone popular on the king's side. The priest is the guy who's pushing reform to the nation. King agrees. So then they're murdered. Now, let's go do something else first. So I haven't thought of a name for her, but the admin. So the admin character, I'm not going to bother thinking of a name just yet. So the admin character, she's, just so you understand, and in case you haven't watched any of the episodes, please go back and watch them, like and subscribe, comment, of course. She's in this universe, the sort of the adventurers who defeat the monsters and stuff like that. They're formed, and then they're led by this admin character who is above them on the sort of power level scale. So she's there to sort of protect them and guide them and give them an experience while letting them dealing with some of these things themselves. And she's more powerful, and she's been leading this group, and she's forming more of a close bond with Fortis and Huxton than the rest of the group. And this is her time to shine, because she's kind of taken a back seat in other stories. So what's her way of solving a crime that's different? Now, the problem we have, we're in a magical universe. I think I have a very broad magical system where people can do lots of different things. So I think the only way to make this work is to cut out magic entirely from the situation. So the crime was committed in a non-magic area. So it's committed in a non-magical area. So the victim is killed in a place where magic is not allowed or prevented from working. So that automatically cuts out any, like, the reader will go, oh, so it wasn't magic at all. It wasn't like a little tiny bug that had been magically brainwashed to go inside with a poison tipped pincers that bit the victim and no, nothing like that. And I'll have to make that very clear. Let's do this in red. So, but also, and now red herring, make that clear. So now we've actually got a red herring. The reader Oops, so Daisy, thin that down. The reader will assume that's a lie. So they'll be trying to figure out and look for instances about where that could be undone. And that I'm gonna, so in previous books, show non-magic areas can't be violated. Now, so here, this is something you have to figure out in your murder mystery books. You have to lay some groundwork, I think, and it has to be introduced. In a way, your book gives all the parameters that are possible for how this murder is done, or what the solution to the mystery in its entirety. I read the Jack Reacher books by Lee Child. I would say that pretty much all of them are solvable. You can kind of guess what the mystery is along the way. One of my favourites is called Worth Dying For. Is it Worth Dying For? Yes, Worth Dying For. And the mystery isn't who the villains are. It's quite clear who the villains are. But the mystery, spoiler alerts, is what the product that's being moved by the villains is. You get the clues, and I think you figure it out quite early, given what's said. But the groundwork is laid throughout the story. You're actually you almost see the product get moved around before Jack Reacher can get to it and stop it. And there are little hints and clues. So you want to lay the groundwork for this stuff. So here, I have to have the crime done in a non-magical area, so the reader doesn't go, oh, magic just did it. And also that prevents me from just making magic the solution, which is boring for the reader. But now I have to think, this is a potential red herring around down here. So now I have to lay the groundwork throughout the whole book that any non-magical area that can't be violated in any way. So when the reader reads this murder mystery, they might be thinking, someone bypassed the non-magical role. But if I've made it clear before that you can't, they should have disregarded that as their thinking. And essentially, this murder mystery book is going to prove that it definitely couldn't have been violated, and that will get the reader, I was wrong, darn, keep reading, figure this out, so on and so forth. But also that keeps them hooked into the story to hear the solution. About, in some ways, you also read a murder mystery to be proven wrong, because you want to read a story about a clever detective. So the crime is committed in a non-magical area, and I'll lay the groundwork about how these non-magical areas cannot be violated. Here's one thing. A punishment for those who try. That excellent. Sorry, I just realised something. Another point. Another red herring. So I'll put red herring 2. A suspect has injuries that shows they tried to violate non-magic. So what I'll do in previous book, show the punishment. So in the previous book, there'll be a non-magical area. One of the characters violates the non-magic. They get an injury from it. And then a suspect, who I'll just introduce earlier in this murder mystery book, will show those injuries. If a reader's paying attention, they'll go, he tried to violate a non-magical area. This priest was killed in a non-magical area. It must be him. And there's another red herring number 2. I think it's kind of fair to say that, have you ever heard, when someone piece of advice that is given a lot when you write murder mysteries, you just get the ending and work your way backwards. I think that's what I think with all the little lines that potentially lead to a suspect being the main murderer. they're all, it is a bit like working backwards and seeing where the opportunities, because you need means, motive, and opportunity. So yes, this suspect will be proven innocent because they tried to get over the non-magical area, and obviously while they couldn't have the opportunity because they couldn't get around the magic and so forth. um Excellent. That's one way of figuring out, like, oh, I've got a suspect now. I've got a line of questioning that Fortas and Huxton and the admin can do now. They the admin will go, well, that guy's got that means he tried to break the non-magical, so that the non-magical area, that means he's a suspect. He failed to do non-magic, but that means he must have done something else to try and murder it, but that will be proven false. Excellent. So after all this, I still failed to come up with a way for the admin to do it. How's she going to solve these things? Now, I think we have to leverage her background in bits. So she's one of these people who is evaluating and teaching and helping adventurers level up so then they can be left alone and they know how to do it and off they go. So that probably would make her a student of like personalities. She's a teacher, essentially. She understands people. She understands people. She can also build up people. I guess that's a subset of being a teacher, but she can build up people. Her job is to get people into a position where they can go off and be adventurers by themselves. So how can she use this to solve crimes? So I think she's got to use it by this makes it sound, maybe manipulate people. Also, maybe she should have like a gut instinct as well. She has a gut instinct as well. That's just there, and you. It's funny that you're actually, in like scientific terms, people are being told to actually follow their gut, because I think there's a brain down there in your stomach. But I think some people who follow their gut about things are more likely to be right than like logically thinking it through all the time. So I think she should get like gut instincts about suspects. Okay, so like rather than meeting suspects sort of like all at once, like in a police procedural show where there's clearly 5 suspects and we watch them interview all at once, and they focus on one and off they go, it's proven wrong. They come back to another, off they go, it's proven wrong. They come back to one, it's proven right, or it's proven that it was actually this original one in the head. Doesn't matter what. But her she investigates in one at a time. So she meets all the suspects. She ignores all the rest and focuses on this her gut problem, and each one is guilty of something. Each one is guilty of something. So her method, I'm going to keep this at the back of my head and I'll develop it a little bit more. Her method for figuring out, say, Sherlock's is observing and figuring out the narrative. Miss Marple's is just being the old lady that no one really thinks is a problem. Columbo's was being a sort of bumbling detective who's just asking innocent questions that then leads to just one more thing, and so on and so forth. Her character thing is she follows her gut instinct. That tends to lead to someone's guilty, but she manipulates people into talking about themselves until they reveal the main crime. Until they reveal something about themselves that leads to more evidence. She needs something else. Something else that would give her the edge over anyone else investigating the crime. Maybe because she gotta leverage that experience, that teaching. obviously Fortis and Huxton have to help out in some ways. Oh, as Fortis and Huxton ask, like they learn from her, ask her what she's doing. Ask her. They're learning, because in a way that's also the reader. Fortis and Huxton are almost being the reader in this case, asking questions. She answers, then she gets the clue. Ask her what she's doing. They're learning reveals answers. Not just the answers to what she's doing, but... And so the reader is actually kind of there. So Fortis and Huxton are being the reader, asking these questions. She's the one who answers them, and then it's like that. As she gives that answer, she realizes what the solution might be. Okay, it's kind of vague at the moment, but we need more. Let's think about now the crime itself, and we're going to work backwards. So means, motive, and opportunity. Okay, so means in a second. The motive. Why kill the priest? To implicate the king. So the point of it is to frame the king, because the point is to get rid of the king. Frame the king. So frame the king. So that's the motive. Okay. Okay, let's talk about the actual the murderer themselves. Who should they be? Should they be the person who's most likely to take over? It's got to be, the person has to be bad. The question is, do they work for Bob, or should they be manipulated by Bob without knowing it? See, this isn't a question of what makes a good murder mystery. This is a question of what I want the book to portray, to be interesting for the reader. Is my bad guy, like... I think, given that Bob is also, while he's this terrifyingly magical Dark Lord, he's also supposed to be an amalgamation of the evil people in our society today. So that's the dictators, that's the wealthy who hoard wealth, and the politicians who pad their own bank accounts or just do something that they want, that they know is bad, but it feels good to them. For Bob to be an amalgamation of that, those kind of people manipulate others to get what they want. They manipulate the system, they work the system. So it feels to me that what Bob should be doing is he's purposely weakening them. So that means the murderer is working for Bob. Is he a true believer? No, because I think in real life, the people who put these terrible people in power, they're not true believers. They want something for themselves. Working for Bob, for themselves, they want power. But they won't be betrayed by Bob. Bob's on their side. For themselves, their power as well. Which means I'm going to put them as... Well, they can't be the... So, like, the advisor to who would take over. So once the king is deposed, a new person comes in line who would be terrible for the kingdom, like the Denethor of the kingdom, and make things worse. Let's just go off here for a second. The Denethor of this kingdom. So, branching off from that, when king is framed, so that's like the middle point, is framed. When the king is framed, this guy takes over. And then who really did it is revealed. Who really did it is revealed. The Denethor refuses to leave, and that gives us our political problems. That will be in the next book. That's like the political thriller, and we'll see how this works. Denethor refuses to leave. Refuses to leave, and that's the next book. Okay, I just needed to make a note of that so I know where that's going. Okay, so the murderer is working for Bob, but so they can get more power and influence. They're not a true believer in Bob. They just want to use that position. They're manipulating the kingdom in order to get the Denethor kind of character in power, because they know this guy is weak and corrupt, can be manipulated for Bob. And that's why they murdered the priest, because the priest is... he's framing the king for that. Right, so that means... So the opportunity is going to be... So that's the... why could he to frame the king? That's the motive. So I'm going to go opportunity. So we're in a non-magical zone. Maybe the entire palace is non-magical, which gives us a more normal, generic fantasy fantasy look, but with no magic. So the opportunity. Okay. The opportunity. Oh, it's difficult. What would be the opportunity? See, the problem I have with opportunity is... Okay, hang on. The opportunity... It has to sort of... King goes off. King could be suspect. Proof is... He's not. Is hidden. So the king could be suspect. Proof it is not hidden, which also means that at some point the murderer, I'll do like this for now, the murderer has to be unaccounted for. Has to be unaccounted for as well, which is hidden. Okay, so I think I'm getting closer. I might have to think of this situation. Maybe it's like a party. The king goes off. Everyone sees he goes off. Someone is murdered, and therefore the king could be a suspect because he was not present at the same time. But that what he was really doing is hidden, which Fortis and Huxton and the admin have to figure out, thus proving his innocence. And meanwhile, they have to find the clue that proves that the murderer, who was accounted for, wasn't. So so the crux of the issue is going to be when, I'll just put the admin, realizes where the king's proof, where the proof for the king is, where the king's proof is, and why the murderer was lying about where they were. So this comes down to alibis. So this is more puzzle-like. You just have to pay attention to, the reader would have to pay attention to what people are saying and bring it back to, and go, wait, he said he was there, but he was actually there. It's also, I think, it's all right for one fact to bring it, or to bring it together. And the reader should know that that's what Fortis and Huxton and Adamant just thought about, ties it all together. One factor bring it together. The murderer alibi. I've completely forgotten how to spell alibi. I never need an alibi, that's why. That's it, sorry. I never said I was good at spelling. I mean, I should be, but no, because I write for crying out loud. Emmy's alibi is proven false. Yeah, I don't quite like that though. That's common. Like, I wanted this to be specific to this sort of universe a little bit. Let's save it for now. Means, motive, and opportunity. So I've got the motive. I've got the opportunity. Is that some sort of gathering? Maybe people are paying attention to the king. Maybe the priest should be doing something else. And the means. What is the means? How do they do this? So there's no magic, which means they have to rely on more traditional methods like a stabbing, or a crossbow bolt, or strangulation. But they have to get away with it. So, hang on a minute. The means should be confusing. Should be confusing. Go to the next page. I need to think about this a bit more. So, hang on a minute. Go to next page. Let's think about means. Okay. Confusing is what you kind of get in a Jonathan Creek or a Death in Paradise, don't you? What should this means be? So the priest has to be somewhere, else he has to be remote. How they're killed is confusing. That gives me essentially two mysteries, and that keeps the reader a little bit more hooked. They have to figure out who it was, but also how they did it. Dear. You see, this is one where I don't want to be like Jonathan Creek or Death in Paradise, which their mysteries are sometimes about, well, this was impossible, surely. The way that Jonathan Creek solves it is very lateral thinking, and also thinking in a way that, because lateral thinking isn't how we normally approach difficult like problems and look for solutions. Death in Paradise does it better by like saying, but how could they run they couldn't run from there to there, so it's impossible, and they look for other clues to reveal that maybe how it was done slightly different. But then the detective suddenly realizes, oh, like all they had to do was pretend to be watching a video at this time, but the video had been faked and the person was long dead, and then they came around the back and did. It's confusing, but that, like, Death in Paradise does it better by, it doesn't do it better than Jonathan Creek. It just does it in a way that feels more realistic, while Jonathan Creek does it feel in a way that's more complicated and planned and like mysterious and dark and horrifying. And I kind of want to avoid that because I want this to be new. As an author, you should be. It's not a bad idea to strive for some original thinking in what you're doing. So I'm in a fantasy universe. The priest is killed. What is the means? Now, I'm not going to do magic. Ooh. Maybe it should look like magic. So it's not magic. But looks like it. Okay. This could mean that... this could mean laying the groundwork in a previous book. And that plays to the admin's experience as well. So, in past books, hint at something. That's new. looks like magic. Now, in the previous book, the sci-fi book that's covering the sort of sci-fi elements of writing, it was a gun. That's the science fiction that had to be stopped. Well, the gun is the main problem, but it was actually steam technology. Either way. Maybe. Is that too obvious? What I was thinking is that it's actually like some of the science around it. Although, at the end of the previous book, the science fiction element, what I was trying to, the theme there that plays into the larger theme is that some science shouldn't be looked at, and it's actually up to scientists and engineers to stop and wait for us all to be better human beings before introducing this science that could be incredibly destructive. So in the previous book, there's steam technology is developed, but they realize how it could be misused, so they stop until, because they know Bob's out there, until Bob is taken care of. So this can't be used, or more likely isn't going to be used in a terrible, terrible manner. But maybe some of that knowledge comes up. So in past bits, okay, it isn't. So in sci-fi story, I know what it means. In sci story, burning someone without burning them. Victim is burned. Was it magic? Let's say it was like a blast of steam. Or the opposite. You can't blast cold, can you? No, you could. Blast of cold. Okay, I'm getting closer and closer. Right. This is how I'm going to... All this has like led me to... Has triggered stuff in your brain, and I think you kind of have to go through these motions to trigger it all. This is what it's going to be. Victim is discovered burned. So the admin investigates magic in a non-magic place. That's a dead end in terms of investigation, but then that leads to eventually the admin will realise the steam tech is out there. The steam tech is out there. However, so the reader will hopefully like see this along the same way, and I have to think about this so much more deeply. That steam tech is out there. The steam tech is out there, and therefore they will find a suspect based on that. However, it's not a steam burn or fire burn. It's a cold burn. Previously, it's shown that like ice cold water, steam, whatever. No, obviously not ice cold steam, but some like ice cold mist, some not nitroglycerin, like sub-zero nitrogen. You know what I mean. Ice cold water is part of the technology. Previously, it's shown that ice cold water is part of technology Steam. I'm being very vague in my thing in Steam text. Part of. I have to be less. Part of Steam Tech. So that leads us back to here. So it's not Steam Tech, it's cold burn. So the murderer, to give themselves an extra layer of protection about being discovered, didn't use heat but cold, because cold like if you're frozen instantly, you can get cold burns. You don't just get hot burns. So in sci-fi book, show that in an irrelevant manner. So in the previous book, you show that someone can get burned by the cold and burned by heat, but that's like so minor. They'll try to prove someone did it through heat, but it couldn't possibly have been done through heat. Admin realizes it could have been done with cold. So the murderer didn't use heat but cold. They realized another bluff, essentially. So the means is this. I'll figure this out a little bit more. The priest who's the victim, they're killed with something that, like, I'll write the scene where they turn around and suddenly something erupted at them. Then we see them being discovered by Fortis and Huxton. Maybe it's a body on the ground. They look burned, but they look burned, but no scorching. Okay. Just hit the flash. Okay, so the murderer is doing this. The murderer wants to obviously deflect suspicion away from them. So they, in a non-magical area, they burn the in a non-magical area, they burn the priest to death, as it were. So that sets up people thinking, the reader is almost primed to think, well, that means it must have been magic in a non-magical area, and the mystery is, how do they do that? The book revealed that was impossible by the midway part, say, even though the king still gets implicated. What the murderer actually did is that they used a technological, scientific way of producing fire to burn them, and so the admin will realise that and move away from the magic done in a non-magical area. But then they will follow that line of, well, it must have been fire. But throughout all this, Fortis and Huxton and the admin will be going, but why was there no scorching anywhere else in the room and on the clothing of the victim? And that's because if you use cold to burn someone to death, then let's say it's their entire face gets burned, then that's not going to affect the clothing. So that's 3 levels there. The murderer is putting the idea into everyone's head that it was magic in a non-magical place. That's proven to be false, that the non-magic held and magic could not possibly be done. Our admin character, Fortis and Huxton, realised then that it must have been fire produced in a different way, a technological way, which perhaps leads them to a scientist that they met in the previous episode to blame them, and they're the suspect, which then possibly leads to the framing of the king. Maybe the king knows about the tech, thus is suspected. The king would know about it because in the previous one it was sort of being funded and understood by the king at the same time. We should meet the king in the previous one in order to lay the groundwork for his character as well. So, where was I? The admin and Fortis and Huxton realise, well, it must have been fire that is produced and burns the priest using technology and science. This leads them to question one of the other scientists. This leads them to suspect the king, because the king maybe he confiscated the technology based on what happened in the previous episode. But instead, they go down that route. They implicate the king. The king kind of gets removed from power, setting up some political turmoil for the next book in this anthology. But then they it's the question of how could the priest only be burned on their face when surely these clothes would have been burned too. And that's when something will happen, maybe a question from Fortis and Huxton, that triggers in the admin to realise cold burns like, the intense cold can burn like fire, and it doesn't scorch. And then they investigate the priest's clothing and realise that there's something on them that actually would be the result of freezing clothing very quickly. And that's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to have to stop this episode there. I know this episode is nowhere complete. I'm going to have to do a dual feature for once, but I'm trying to keep these videos down to like an hour. I've gone to an hour and 10 minutes. I apologise for that. I still hope that this episode has been helpful with you to see how you can get a murder mystery to work and what you need to look for to get it to be original and different. I'm writing a murder mystery within a fantasy universe, and this is where I come back to that note I made earlier about, where did I make it though? That's the question. Men at Arms here. This is a Discworld book where a gun was invented and used. So the Vimes, the main, should have said spoiler alert there, I apologise. Either way, Vimes has no idea of what a gun is, but over the course figures out that this technology must exist. The mystery is, of course, who's using the weapon, and that's revealed piecemeal, and you can figure it out. The point is that Discworld is a magical universe, but the way Terry Pratchett writes means that magic is solely in the purview of these people, and therefore isn't in the purview of all these other characters. So you, as the reader, instantly discount magic at the beginning because you don't think it's going to be any of the wizards, for example, and you know that everyone else in Ankh-Morpork, which is the city on a Discworld that it happened in, would also not use magic in this way. So, and that's what I've got to kind of do as well. So that's where the inspiration is here. It's about when you write in a fantasy universe, you kind of have to keep out the magic, or have such a robust magical system you can reveal who it was in a way that's satisfying with all the magic that exists. I'm trying to in Harry Potter, for example, spoiler alerts, in the Prisoner of Azkaban, the secret, the mystery isn't how Sirius Black or Peter Pettigrew did it. The secret ultimately revealed, because he's the murderer, and they are trying to solve a mystery of how he's getting into Hogwarts and things like that. All the groundwork is laid with the magical details that are given in the story, but the true secret isn't who did it. Well, it is, because spoiler alert, it was Peter Pettigrew who killed a bunch of normal non-magical human beings, blamed it on Cyrus. It's say what you like about the Harry Potter universe, but I think the Prisoner of Azkaban quite nicely shows how things could have been done without you going, well, he just did it with magic, because actually the means of him doing it with magic are all laid out in the book for you, and you as the reader just don't think to put these connections together. In it, spoiler alert, Peter Pettigrew is the person who actually killed the Muggles and blamed it on Cyrus. They happened to be in the same place at the same time. Peter Pettigrew caused a massive magical explosion. It killed a bunch of Muggles. Cyrus gets blamed for it. But the way you learn that it's Cyrus is the key thing is that all that was left behind was a finger, And occasionally in the book, you're pointed out that a rat who has missing a finger is actually Peter Pettigrew, and this whole talk about being able to transfigure yourself into animals was a key sort of magical subplot. And when I was reading it, I didn't put that thing together. If you read it and you did, congratulations. That means The Prisoner of Azkaban does have number one, the solvable mystery. But I didn't figure it out, and I was like, oh wow, that's how they did it, of course. And I think that's a good example of using the environment you created, which should give you an out, but instead keeps the mystery by making it very clear what the rules are and making the solution in line with magical concepts you learn throughout the book, which are the means of doing the crime in maintaining the mystery. I hope that when you've watched this video, you've seen how you need to link the means, motive, and opportunity together. You know what's important, these three things here. Probably some other things if you go watch other videos on how to write murder mysteries. And this isn't complete yet. I need to go back and fill in all the different red herrings and the dead ends. But I hope you've seen how you do actually have to start with the end and work your way backwards. And I think if you do that, you're more likely to realise where, like a pyramid, if this was how it did it, the foundations have to support it. If you try to start at the beginning and think, I want this to happen, I want this to happen, I want this to happen, and then you have the murder wanting, that's not a strong foundation. That's a pyramid built like this, which is going to topple. But I hope it's been helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I have to end this. I need these to be shorter than an hour and 15 minutes. But I hope this helps you think about how you write your murder mysteries. If you do it differently, if you have hints and tips, if you think I'm wrong, do put it in the comments. This entire live stream series is about helping authors with their books and giving the experience of my mistakes, maybe your mistakes, and so therefore they can be avoided for new authors. Just remember, make it solvable, put in those red herrings and make sure they're dead ends, and think about the method of the detective, because I think that makes murder mysteries fun, about how they solve it. And one of the reasons I didn't say about why that was fun is that it's teachable. I sometimes tried to observe the world like Sherlock Holmes and realised that I was putting some connections together I'd never seen before that made a situation more interesting. And even just like thinking like Ludwig, for example, made me realise, oh, I should read puzzles, I should get my mind working in different ways. And like in Jonathan Creek, if you think laterally about something, you actually see the world in a whole different light about how people really are. I mean, the truth is all these secrets and lies in murder mysteries are sometimes a bit OTT, and in real life they're much more low-key in many ways. Not always. Like, you watch these murder mysteries and you think these kind of crimes are happening all the time. They're actually a small percentage of like what happens in real crime. But either way, being able to try and be like Jonathan Creek and think a bit laterally about the world changes how you see the world, and you see the simplicity in it, and you take a much more logical approach to things. You can be taught by the detective, by their methods, and also understand the whole way of solving crime, like not crimes, but also solving problems that can apply to you. Murder mysteries can be very helpful for teaching you a new way to think. So try and put that in there too. Make it solvable, put in those red herrings, work on a method the detective can use to solve the crime. I've talked for far too long. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and good luck with your murder mystery writing. Goodbye.